Let's start with what's going on with this election results from 2020. You thought that election was done. It's not. A new study out this afternoon that came out this morning actually shows that most Americans believe there will be a civil war in the United States in the next few years. Look at this. 40%, more than 40% of Americans think that civil war will be likely within a decade. More than 2/5 of Americans believe the civil war is at least somewhat likely in the next 10 years, according to this new survey. How many of you watching right now think it's going to happen sooner than that? Or how many people watching right now think it's already happening? Do you think
like
we're
I
already
said
in the
for a
middle
long
of it?
time, I feel like whether you have weapons or not, I feel like we've been in an ideological civil war for years.
Yeah. Well, I think clearly 2020, when you have this kind of a divisive election, and you see what one political party is doing to weaponize the federal government against a political opponent, of course you're going to see this. And so now we're seeing this with President Trump over the last 24 hours. And if watching the drama unfolding around the investigation of Donald Trump and the cover-up of the Hunter Biden laptop story, you might draw the same conclusions about civil war. There's a couple of big developments over the past 24 hours. First thing is that former President Donald Trump, upon learning about this FBI interference in the election story from Mark Zuckerberg, had something to say about it. But first, I just want to play some context here. If you missed that, if for some reason you missed Mark Zuckerberg on the Joe Rogan podcast admitting that the FBI contacted Facebook and warned them about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and they then, of course, suppressed the story. Here's Mark Zuckerberg.
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because it turned out after the fact, the fact checkers looked into it. No one was able to say it was false.
You think about that for a second, right? So their own fact checkers, which, by the way, we've talked about on the show, right, David? I mean, Facebook's own fact checkers are like former CIA and deep state military. They're members of the intelligence community and former military.
Washington Post people. And
yeah.
Exactly.
They said that there was nothing wrong with it. Their own fact checkers. That's like CNN saying, their fact checkers that nothing's wrong here. And so then they suppress the story.
That's like a chef saying his food, my food tastes excellent. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So here you go. Now President Trump issues a statement on his Truth Social. So he says, Donald Trump says, so now it comes out conclusively that the FBI buried the Hunter Biden laptop story before the election, knowing that if they didn't, quote, Trump would have easily won the 2020 presidential election, end quote. This is massive fraud and election interference at a level never seen before in our country. Remedy, he says, declare the rightful winner, or, and this would be the minimal solution, declare that the 2020 election is irreparably compromised and have a new election immediately. Well, how many of you think that we're going to have a new election immediately? Chances are that's not going to happen, right? Especially, it's just not going to happen. It's not something we do in the United States. I mean, it's a constitutional crisis, right? So clearly, the deep state has moved to try to keep him away from running in 2024. That's the goal.
Well, and just to also give some context, when these fact checkers took down a lot of people that were talking about that story so that it didn't get legs, and you're talking people losing their pages. So, that information was hidden from a lot of people because that information could have, we know what Hillary Clinton's emails did. That helped with her losing the election. So,
yeah.
And the thing is, those people to this day don't have their Facebook accounts back and those things back. So it's like they retroactively aren't going back and repairing the damage that they've already done.
Well, and they've done the same thing around vaccines, right? Facebook, Twitter, they've done the same thing around vaccines. There's a lot of people in our chat right now who have shared information that has now been verified let me just say this. It was verified before, but now we have like mainstream media publications like the New York Times and others verifying these certain stories. So now it's like, oh, now it gives it authenticity, even though we know these news organizations are liars, right? But you were sharing it on your social media and you got in trouble for it. How many people watching right now posted something on Twitter, Facebook, or another platform and got in trouble for it? Just raise your hand. Let me know in the chat right now in the comments. How many of you have had to deal with that?
I'm downplaying it quite a bit, but we lost tens of thousands of dollars over that.
Yeah. Yeah, our channel, like we have a whole team and a whole employees here at Redacted, right? So they blocked our channel for weeks, right? And there are people who posted things about the election and had their entire livelihoods destroyed as a result of it, right? Because these fact checkers told us that it was false when we knew verifiably that it was accurate. So now one interesting point about this, and so many people in our chat are saying me. Yes, it happened to me. Like overwhelming number of people in our chat saying that. People saying Mark bad mofo says I got banned on Twitter. I got banned. Yeah, so many people got banned. Well, we welcome you here on this show. So one interesting angle that hasn't been reported in this is the response to the interview on social media. So Mark Zuckerberg speaks to Joe Rogan on Thursday. Then this thing blows up on Friday. President Trump releases a statement on Truth Social, calls for a new election and an overturning of the 2020 election in the United States. And you'd think this story would have had legs on Facebook. It's Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, on Joe Rogan's podcast, which people share all the time, right? How many people do you know share a Joe Rogan podcast episode? You got to listen to this. You got to listen to this. Oh my God, listen to this episode, right? People do it all the time. So those two things, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook and Joe Rogan, this thing should have gone viral on Facebook at the very least, right? No. It didn't. So they're still suppressing this stuff. Interesting. According to Breitbart, they dropped a bombshell, about this FBI interfering in the 2020 election. So keep this up on the screen. The curious silence on Facebook when CEO Mark Zuckerberg appeared on the world's top podcast, Breitbart says. In the hours following the release of the interview, according to data from social media analytics service Newswhip, the story with the highest velocity on Facebook was a garbage puff piece from Business Insider about Zuckerberg's wife, Priscilla Chan. And even that got relatively little engagement compared to other unrelated stories that were trending on the platform at the same time. It's almost as if they're still suppressing this story. So Zuckerberg sat there on Joe Rogan's podcast and blamed it on Facebook, blamed it on the FBI. We were told to, so we suppressed it because we thought that was the right thing to do. Then it turns out the story was true, and that sucks, he said to Joe Rogan. Oh, well, then you would think the story that you are telling now all about it would go viral. No, it didn't. So something is still in place at Facebook to suppress these stories. Unless something else
maybe once you program the AI, it's like impossible to take it backwards. It's like, oh no, it's on its way to sentient. It has to keep progressing. Like we have no control of it at this point.
I guess. Yeah. What else could it be? Right? It's either it becomes sentient or someone just still has their finger on the scale, right? Their thumb on the scale. So, following the swift spread of Zuckerberg's interview, this is an amazing part of this story, according to Breitbart. Following the swift spread of the Zuckerberg story, Facebook representatives reached out proactively to news organizations. What? So Facebook reached out to news organizations to downplay the story, to downplay the news about Zuckerberg's warnings from the FBI. And specifically, these Facebook representatives who reached out to news organizations after Zuckerberg's interview on Thursday said, quote, they were warnings about Russian propaganda. And they pointed to an earlier interview by Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg in which he referred to FBI warnings of hack and leak operations ahead of the Hunter Biden story. So what they were saying is, hey, forget the Joe Rogan podcast interview. That's today's news. Why don't you go back where he testified and he talked about the hack and leak story beforehand? So ignore this new story. What? Why aren't we hearing more about this angle of the story? Who's pulling the strings here? Who's pulling the freaking strings here on this?
Well, and you're talking about like strings being pulled, like there's an establishment narrative, and when you watch this show, you start to see the narrative that starts to come into the light, right? But like they're doing the same thing with Biden. Biden said a bunch of things, and then all of a sudden you have these little handlers that go, no, he didn't say that. The teleprompter actually said this. Read the line, and it's like you have these people that are just on damage control whenever the narrative starts to publicly get away from what they want it to be or what they need it to be.
Oh yeah, he didn't say that. He didn't mean that. Remember when President Biden told us that we should. We need to have regime change in Russia and get rid of Vladimir Putin. Mm-hmm. Then suddenly they had to walk that back. The White House. No, he didn't say that. He didn't say that. You misheard that. You didn't hear that. You're just forget it. You didn't see any of that.
Well, it's amazing to me because so that's like basically saying like, well, if you look back to before this was entirely debunked, it was perfectly true.
Right.
Right? Like, you just have to look back before the truth came out and it was fine.
Almost There in our chat just sent a super chat. Thank you for your super chat. Almost There says something to think about. Did Zuckerberg blame the FBI because he was trying to protect his own ass? Could very well be. Yeah, could be. It could be, right? I mean, it's a convenient thing to say at that moment. So now there is fallout, though, at the FBI because of this story. Top agents have been fired because of political bias. So this is the guy, Timothy Thibault. It's a flattering photo of Timothy Thibault there. According to the New York Post, the agent was escorted out of the field office on Friday by at least two headquarter-looking types. They escorted him out of the building. Bye-bye. You're done here. Now, he says, or according to reports, that he resigned, but clearly he was forced out. The Washington office, the top FBI agent at the Washington field office, reportedly resigned from the Post last week after facing intense scrutiny over allegations that he helped shield Hunter Biden from criminal investigations into his laptop and business dealings, according to the New York Post. Timothy Thibault, an FBI assistant special agent in charge, was allegedly forced out after he was accused of political bias in his handling of probes involving President Biden's son. The agent was escorted out of the field office by at least two headquarter-looking types last Friday. Thibault and the FBI didn't immediately respond to the Post for comment. He's been there for 25 years. Now, the reason that he's on leave is because a top Republican, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley from Iowa, started raising concerns about whistleblower claims that the FBI obstructed its own investigation into Hunter Biden. There are a number of whistleblowers that have now come forward on this very issue. In fact, Miranda Devine, who is the person who broke the story at the New York Post originally, that was suppressed by Facebook and by Twitter, Miranda Devine says, in avoiding the inspector general who has no jurisdiction over ex-FBI agents, Thibault can retire on a pension of $80,000 for his 25-year tenure. The FBI's $10 billion budget, minus 99% for salaries and expenses, can accommodate pensioning off those who might disclose dirty laundry to the inspector general's office. So these guys can get early retirement and now not have to release information to the inspector general.
Well, and also to get that $80,000, I guarantee you there's a bunch of documents they sign on their way out.
Oh, sure. All sorts of, quiet, NDAs
non-disclosures.
and things that they can't talk about, right? So, I mean, this is an interesting side of this story. Is this guy particularly, this guy Timothy Thibault had made anti-Trump rant social media posts. And according to Miranda Devine at the New York Post, he also went after people specifically who were pro-Trump in the FBI, basically had them fired or cordoned off, sectioned off, people, and any FBI agents who actually went to or a part of like January 6th, and who were there as well. So really, really interesting on that side of it with this FBI agent. Is there another shoe to drop? We'll see. The other question we have this afternoon, and some deeper analysis into what in the hell were they actually looking at what were they looking for at Mar-a-Lago? And Mike Lee, who is, I don't know how to describe Mike Lee, but he was on the Breitbart podcast last night, and he's had
a senator, right?
No. I'm sorry, Mike Lee.
Oh.
Yeah, no, Lee Smith. What am I saying? Yeah, Lee Smith. I don't know why. I had like a backwards moment there. I'm like, what am I talking about?
No worries.
Yeah, Mike Lee is a member of Congress, but Lee Smith has some theories about specifically what they were looking for at Mar-a-Lago, and he was on the Breitbart podcast, and I want to play this audio for you too. So take a listen to this podcast with Lee Smith.
What is the Department of Justice trying to do, and what's going to happen to Donald Trump?
All right. Well, let me start with your last question first. I've been concerned the last several months now that they're going to indict Donald Trump sometime before Election Day, and that will unleash different forces that this country has never seen before unleashed. So now let me see if I can work backwards. I think the best way to understand this is in the context of a now 6-year-long operation targeting Donald Trump, Donald Trump's aides, and Donald Trump's supporters. I have different colleagues and people whose insight and whose wisdom I trust very much, and they believe that what the FBI was looking for were documents related to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, what the FBI called the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. But what most of the rest of us know is the Russiagate operation meant to target candidate Trump, then President-elect Trump, and then President Donald J. Trump.
So Lee Smith, investigative journalist who wrote the bombshell book, The Permanent Coup, How Enemies, Foreign and Domestic Targeted the American President. So Lee Smith, I mean, think about that for a second, that they were specifically looking at, and we've heard this, I heard this from a number of different sources in the days after the raid, that what they were looking for were documents specifically around Crossfire Hurricane. That what they had, what President Trump had, was evidence that the Russiagate, what they had on Russiagate and the collusion within the federal government on that. So that's what Lee Smith is saying, investigative journalist from a number of different sources. And that he's saying if we see an indictment could lead to civil war, complete unrest in the United States. And I don't disagree with that. I mean, do you guys agree with that? I think if there's an indictment of President Trump, game over. I mean, I think what Lindsey Graham said on Sunday is absolutely accurate. Lindsey Graham came out and said that he predicts riots in the streets if Trump is prosecuted. He drew a comparison between the investigation of former President Donald Trump and the decision not to prosecute Hillary Clinton over her private email server. Here is Lindsey Graham on Fox talking about this moment and these whistleblowers at the FBI. Listen.
What happened with Hunter Biden is that the FBI weighed in to make sure a story didn't break for the 2020 election. We now have whistleblowers at the FBI telling Senator Grassley that they were told to slow down and back off Hunter Biden. And I'll say this, if there's a prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets.
So now he's getting backlash for that. Some are saying, how dare you call for violence? And he clarified it yesterday, saying, no, I wasn't calling for violence. What I'm saying is there are deep political divisions in this country. Look, I think Senator Lindsey Graham is a grifter. I've always thought that. But I think he's right. I think I agree with him on this. I think there will be a revolt. I think if you see a former president of the United States prosecuted, or it's going to be a dark day in the United States. Meanwhile, you have President Biden, who's going to give a big speech on Thursday. So President Biden's supposed to be giving a big speech on the heart and soul of the United States. He's going to talk about the soul of the nation. So this is going to be the focus of this speech on Thursday night. By the way, we haven't seen President Biden do any kind of an interview for, I don't know, it's like 200 days now or something, like where he has not sat down for an interview with the press. I think it's over 200 days now.
It is.
So, and this is why his approval rating is up, by the way. Here it turns out if you're the federal government, you give people like money, which is what he's doing, and then you're also not doing interviews and you're just letting the deep state run things, then that's how you improve your approval ratings, I guess.
Well, his whole election campaign was him hiding as much as possible, and his poll numbers stayed there. Every time he would actually meet the public or talk to anybody, it went down. So they're just like, just keep him put away.
Meet the Fockers. So here's how NBC puts it. Biden to give primetime speech about soul of the nation as voters prepare to cast midterm ballots. The president is expected to speak Thursday night at outside Independence Hall in Philadelphia. I wonder, so he's going to go to Philadelphia, and we're also learning that he's going to be speaking about crime and gun control as well. By the way, he's choosing Philadelphia, which, of course, has gun control laws. Philadelphia has had unbelievable violence. So this is an interesting spot where he's going to go and speak about the soul of America, soul of the nation, in one of the most my home city of Philadelphia, in one of the most violent cities that have just like total degradation. Like we've seen the videos. I've shown you if you follow me on Twitter, I've tweeted videos of like driving through South Philly and, on Kensington Avenue and these other streets. And just like, you're like, is that America or is that a war zone? No, it's Philadelphia with people just doing drugs, laying there in a pool of drugs, total disaster.
Yeah, the same thing out here.
In Portland? Yeah. Portland, Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was driving down a street. Yeah, I was driving down, I think it's Water Street. I can't remember the exact street name, but just like cars up on blocks and just, down a whole road. And it looks like a war zone. It looked like literally somebody went down there and blew a bunch of stuff up and then left.
It's America. But
yeah, that same area, not too long ago, it's Water Avenue is what David's talking about. And I was like driving down there a couple months back, and it's like Road Warrior down there. There's literally a guy walking with a stick with a giant fan blade attached to it, like an axe. And it was just like literally walking down the street with one of those strapped to his back. And I was like, holy shit, it is freaking Road Warrior out here.
Or like Walking Dead.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like walking out, you don't even see zombie attack or something, like that's what it's like. So, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press spokeswoman, had this to say about what we can expect to hear from President Biden. Listen.
From the president about the importance of making sure that we protect our communities. The president has been really clear that congressional Republicans, that extreme MAGA agenda that you heard him talk about last week is a threat to the rule of law. He will say.
Oh, so he's going to say that. Okay. So that's what we're going to hear from the president. Way to heal the nation, right? You're going to go
I love when he has to throw MAGA in there all the time. It's like
this MAGA.
They're such fear mongers. They try to use all these terms to fear monger and just make Republicans and MAGA and all this look like this big evil thing that we're fighting, but they're the exact, like we're fighting them just as hard.
Yeah, the MAGA. So he's gonna speak about the soul of the nation in Philadelphia. He's going to talk about crime, gun control, violence, and MAGA. So this will really help heal the nation. This is going to do a good healing. And, I would love to see how much involvement do you have at the Department of Justice right now going after your political rival, your top political rival right now? Isn't it funny? I heard this today. I'm curious what you guys think of this. We got more news to get to in a second, but Michael Cohen, former President Trump's lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, came out and he was interviewed yesterday, and he said that he thinks that President Trump does not want to run again in 2024, and that he is scared of running against Liz Cheney. And I just about fell out of my chair when I heard that. Liz Cheney? First of all, I'm going to make a prediction right here on this show. I'll do it like an Alex Jones style prediction. Okay. So if this comes true, I want you all to give me a high five. Liz Cheney is going to be back in power somehow. Now, I don't know how. I don't know if it's going to be as a senator. I don't know if it'll be as a representative. I don't know if it'll be as, vice president. She will be back in power in Washington. Not because I want her to be. She's a neoconservative warmonger in the vein of her father, warmonger and war criminal Dick Cheney. But the deep state military-industrial complex loves Dick Cheney. They make billions of dollars off of that mechanism, that machine that Dick Cheney put in place. Liz Cheney will be back in power somehow. They will see to it. The deep state people that run this country will have her back in power in some way. Disagree with me?
Even if it's just on K Street.
Yeah, she'll have power somehow in Washington. Somehow. And I think in a big, big way. Secretary of State, perhaps. And I think, here's the normalizing what's been happening too. Democrats have been, praising her, right, for her stance against Trump during January 6th, et cetera. But she voted, I think over 93% of her votes were in line with what President Trump wanted. So this idea that she's some rebel, or she's not, she voted 93% of the time with Republicans on every major issue. But they love her because she's a neocon, and she will keep the Dick Cheney mechanism burning and churning and doing what it needs to. So the deep state will make sure that she's back in power. Mark my words. You heard it here first. I believe that's going to be the case. But I don't believe that Donald Trump is scared to run up against her. I think if anything, he'd call her out, and this is where you would see the deep state getting involved to make sure that he doesn't win. We'll see.